The galaxy was alive with voices. Fleets spoke in coded bursts of light, stations exchanged streams of data, and traders argued over prices in every language ever invented. Even in the silent vacuum of space, there was always a kind of noise engine. Signatures, energy pulses, life signs moving from one world to another. It had been this way for centuries. Then, one moment, everything changed. It began as a strange vibration that touched sensors in a dozen star systems at once. It wasn't sound, not in the way air carried it. This was deeper, something heavy, something old. The kind of feeling that settled in the bones of anyone who heard it through a ship's hull. It rolled across the void like a slow wave, and every crew that felt it froze in place. In the war room of the Virex Empire, admirals stared at their displays. "We just felt something," one muttered. No one knew how to describe it. In the crystal palaces of the Klin Dominion, data scientists replayed the signal over and over, convinced it was a weapons test. In the marketplaces of Orion Station, traders stopped mid-bargain, heads turning toward the stars as if they could see what had happened. The truth was, something had happened, something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity had fired its newest weapon, the Solar Lance Railgun. It had been built in secrecy, orbiting a hidden moon far from any alien eyes. No one outside Earth's high command had even known it existed. Now its first shot had ripped across the darkness with enough force to be felt light years away. The beam itself wasn't a beam at all. It was a solid slug of dense alloy, longer than a starship and heavier than a mountain. Accelerated to a fraction under light speed. It didn't glow, didn't roar it, simply moved so fast that the space around it bent. On the monitors in the human command center, the shot crossed hundreds of millions of kilometers in a heartbeat. The target is a set of coordinates deep in unclaimed space. To the untrained eye, it looked like they were firing at nothing. The alien governments noticed. Within hours, encrypted questions were flooding human diplomats. Why fire such a weapon at empty space? Was this a warning? A threat? Humans answered none of them. The orders had been simple. Test the weapon, confirm the kill, reveal nothing. But not everyone believed the space was empty. In a small listening post belonging to the Macquarie Republic, a technician replayed the moments before the shot. On her screen, a strange distortion flickered in the coordinates the humans had targeted. It was there for less than a second, then gone like a shadow moving between the stars. She reported it up the chain of command, but her superiors told her to delete the file. "Too dangerous," they said. "If it's what I think it is, we don't speak of it." Meanwhile, aboard the Solar Lance platform, the crew worked in tense silence. The shot had been perfect, the recoil dampeners holding under the unimaginable force. Sensors confirmed that, whatever had been at the target, the location no longer existed. But the commanding officer, Admiral Kane, didn't smile. "This isn't victory," he said quietly. "This is a warning shot, and not for them." His crew didn't ask what he meant. They didn't want to know. Across the galaxy, the silence after the shot grew heavier. Normally, a major weapons test would be followed by chatter, by nervous arguments, by threats. This time there was almost nothing. A few private messages between alien rulers, a handful of scrambled transmissions between war fleets, but no official statements. It was as if everyone understood that whatever the humans had done, it wasn't meant to be discussed. On the third day after the firing, an old signal reached Earth's high command. It wasn't human in origin. It was a deep, irregular pulse 3. Long bursts, 2 short, 3 long again. The signal was ancient, one humanity had first picked up decades earlier, and it came from beyond the rim of known space. No one in the public ever learned what it meant, but Kane did. He had seen the decoded translation. "We saw your weapon. We are coming." Back in the alien capitals, suspicion turned to fear. Every intelligence agency dug through its archives, looking for any sign of what had been at those coordinates. Some found fragments of old mission logs, mentions of ships that had gone missing in that region. Others found Stranger Things dead transmissions from scout vessels, static-filled recordings of shapes blotting out the stars. But none of it. was enough to make sense of why the humans had chosen that moment, that place, to fire. Out in the black, the solar lance was already recharging for its next shot. It would take days. The engineers moved quickly, replacing heat sinks, recalibrating magnetic rails. No one dared to think about what might happen if the weapon wasn't ready in time. On the 10th day, Kane stood alone on the observation deck. Beyond the glass, the stars burned cold and distant. He thought of the ancient signal of the shadow that had been erased, and of the thing it had whispered across the void. He knew the galaxy thought the Railgun was built as a threat to them. They were wrong. It was built because of what was out there, what was always out there, and now, thanks to that first shot, it knew exactly where to find them. The message had been short, but it stayed in Kane's mind like a cold hand gripping his spine. "We saw your weapon. We are coming." It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a fact. Something certain. Something unstoppable. 4 days after the firing of the solar lance, the galaxy had been strangely quiet. It's not the usual quiet of space, but the kind of silence that happens when predators smell something in the air and freeze. Alien fleets stopped their training exercises. Trade routes went half empty. Even pirate broadcasts cut down their chatter. No one wanted to be noticed, but some were too curious to stay silent. On the moon city of Calvor Prime, the Zyran collectives, Intelligence Division gathered in a dim chamber, reviewing the humans' firing data. Dozens of holographic streams floated in the air heat maps, trajectory models, energy signatures. Commander Thress, a tall Zyran with eyes like molten gold, pointed to the shot's destination. "They hit this exact point," he said. 100 million kilometers from the nearest asteroid field. "No station, no wreckage. Nothing. Thing we can see," replied his second officer. She pulled up an old Zyran exploration log from 70 years ago. The final entry before the ship disappeared was a single note from the captain: "Shadows in the stars." Meanwhile, in the human capital on Earth, the High Command had locked the firing records behind layers of clearance. Only 10 people were allowed to know what the solar lance had destroyed. Kane was one of them, and he wished he wasn't, at 0200 hours. Kane sat in the command center, staring at the deep space feed from the edge of human territory. The void looked calm, the stars unmoving. But he knew better. They're not rushing. He muttered, "They don't need to rush." An ensign approached. "Sir, priority code from the listening post at Proxima 9. The young officer looked pale. Kane opened the message. It wasn't words, it was a visual feed. The recording showed empty space. Then slowly, a patch of stars went dark, not dimmed. Gone, like someone had taken a knife to the night and cut a hole in it. Seconds later, the feed went to static. Kane. "Shut the file. How far from our borders?" 18 hours at their speed, the ensign replied. "That's impossible," Kane said. 18 hours means... He stopped himself. The solar lance needed 24 hours to recharge. Across the galaxy, in the Iridani Confederation, a different meeting was taking place. Ambassador Sella of Iridani was speaking with the human envoy. "We intercepted your Railgun shot," she said carefully. "You know, in our laws, an unprovoked weapons discharge into neutral space is considered." "It wasn't unprovoked," interrupted the human envoy. "Then what was it?" "Message," the envoy said, standing. "But not for you." Sella's voice sharpened. "Then for who?" The human didn't answer, simply walked out. In the next 24 hours, rumors spread. Some alien networks claimed the humans had destroyed a rogue fleet. Others whispered about ancient beings hidden in the dark, waiting for the right time to strike. The Macri Republic declared a formal inquiry, but their own records were already disappearing from archives. As if someone or something didn't want the truth spreading on the Solar Lance station. The crew worked like machines, reloading the weapon with its second slug, a polished cylinder of metal, so dense it warped the floor beneath its cradle. The rails were recalibrated, the capacitors charged, the coolant tanks refilled. The engineers whispered among themselves. Most had joined the project thinking it was a deterrent against alien powers. Now they knew better. And the truth was worse. By the 19th hour, the deep space sensors lit up again. Multiple contacts. At first, They looked like asteroids on a strange course. Then the computer marked them moving too fast, changing direction too sharply. Kane ordered magnification. The crew stared at the display. Shapes glided through the dark, barely visible like liquid shadows. They didn't shine. They didn't reflect. They absorbed the light around them, swallowing whole starfields behind their bodies. "They're not ships," whispered one officer. "No engines, no heat." The contacts split into two groups, one heading toward the solar lance, the other veering into alien territory. Kane knew what that meant. They weren't just here for humans. They were here for everything. "Time to impact?" Kane asked. "First group 12 hours. We'll have the lance ready in 6, said the chief engineer. "And if they dodge?" Kane asked. No one answered. Far away in the Virex Empire's war room, similar scenes unfolded. The alien admirals watched as the shadow contacts entered their border. Within minutes, 2 of their patrol fleets vanished from the tactical display. No distress, calls, no wreckage, just gone. Panic began to spread. Civilian ships demanded evacuation corridors. Governments quietly moved their leaders to fortified moons. But no one wanted to admit the truth that something had entered the galaxy, that none of their weapons could stop. Back on the Solar Lance platform, Kane looked at the recharging weapon. One shot had erased a shadow, but how many were coming? Now, 10, 100, thousands? And if the lance couldn't fire fast enough, what then? The station's long-range comms crackled suddenly. A deep, distorted voice filled the control room. It wasn't speaking any known language, but the translation AI worked in seconds. The words chilled the air. "You woke us. You fired first. 8 now. You will see the rest of us." The crew sat frozen. Kane didn't move. Outside the window, the stars burned faintly. Unaware of what was rushing toward them, somewhere far out in the dark, the shadows were coming, and this time they weren't alone. The shadows moved without haste, yet each second brought them closer. They didn't follow the rules of the galaxy's ships. No engines, no drive signatures, no ion trails. They just slid through space like stains spreading through water. The solar lance was almost ready. Its giant capacitors throbbed with stored energy, the rails glowing faintly from the heat of charging. Crew members hurried between control panels, checking systems twice, sometimes 3 times. Even the air inside the station seemed tense, heavy, as if the metal walls understood what was coming. Kane stood in front of the main screen, eyes fixed on the tactical display. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belts, commanded fleets against the Klin Dominion, even faced the wrath of the Virex Empire. None of that had prepared him for this. "They're not hunting for resources," he said quietly. "They're hunting for silence?" "What do you mean, sir?" an ensign asked. "They leave no wreckage, no survivors, no signals," Kane said. "When they pass, it's as if nothing was ever there. They erase the noise of life itself." Across the galaxy, alien worlds were learning that truth firsthand. On the colony world of Prathan, a defensive fleet opened fire on an incoming shadow. Plasma beams, missiles, railguns, every weapon the colony had lit the blackness. The shadow didn't dodge. The attacks simply vanished when they touched it, like water soaking into dry sand. Then the shadow reached the fleet. One by one, the colony's ships winked out from sensors. No explosions, no distress calls gone. Minutes later, the colony itself fell silent. News of the attack spread fast. The Iridani Confederation called an emergency session of its Grand Assembly. Leaders from 100 worlds argued over what to do. Some demanded they confront the humans for hiding such a threat. Others insisted that the shadows were the humans' own creation, a secret weapon gone wrong. But deep down, none of them truly believed that. On the Solar Lance station, the comms lit up with incoming transmissions from alien military channels. Most were not friendly. What are they? How do we stop them? Why did you fire first? Kane ignored them. Time spent talking was time not spent preparing. By the 7th hour before contact, the lance was fully charged. The crew loaded the second. Slug, a monstrous spear of metal with edges sharp enough to cut human skin just by touching. As the rails locked it into place, a low hum filled the chamber. The sound of a weapon hungry to be unleashed. Target the lead shadow, Kane ordered. Computer tried to lock on, but the shape kept shifting. It wasn't solid. One moment it looked like a long, thin blade in the dark. The next it was a massive winged thing, blocking half a starfield. The targeting officer's hands shook. "It's moving wrong, sir. I can't." The shadow stopped moving. Then it turned, directly facing the solar lance. It had no eyes, no face, but the crew felt it watching them. "Fire," Kane said. The station shook. The slug tore free from the rails, vanishing into the void so fast that air itself seemed to tear apart in its wake. A few seconds later, the sensors lit up with a burst of distorted light. The shadow split into fragments, each fragment shrinking until nothing remained. The crew cheered too soon. 4 more shadows emerged from the black. They had been traveling behind the first, hidden. Now they spread apart, surrounding the stations. "Position on the star map." "They're adapting," Kane muttered. "They sacrificed the first one to see how we kill them." In the alien capital of the Virex Empire, Admiral Jor received the same tactical feed. He realized with a cold certainty that the humans were not the enemy here. "We need to speak with them," he told his staff. "If the lance falls, so will we all." But the Virex Senate refused. Too much pride, too much fear of being seen. As weak, back on the lance station, Kane knew the weapon would take another 24 hours to fire again. The shadows would arrive in less than 5. They'd smaller guns, missile batteries, laser turrets, but none of those had worked for other worlds unless. Kane's mind turned to the classified file he'd read years ago. It wasn't about weapons. It was about patterns, light, sound, energy. The first human scouts who had seen these things recorded something strange. The shadows slowed whenever exposed to certain pulses of radiation. Not stopped, but slowed. "Bring up the auxiliary emitters," Kane ordered. "Sir, those are for navigation and hazard marking." "Do it," Kane snapped. The station's outer hull came alive with pulses of brilliant, blinding light. They flashed in patterns no natural star would make irregular bursts. Sudden flares, rapid shifts in color. The effect was immediate. The 4 shadows slowed, their smooth glide breaking into uneven lurches. "It's working," the science officer said. "Not for long," Kane replied. Indeed, the shadows were already adjusting, their movements becoming smoother again. But every second bought was another second for other human fleets to prepare or run. Kane opened a channel to all ships in the sector. "This is Admiral Kane of the Solar Lance. We've found a way to delay them. Transmitting the pattern now. Repeated on all frequencies. And if you think hiding will save you, it won't." Alien worlds, leaders who had spent centuries ignoring human broadcasts, now listened closely. The pulse pattern was repeated across hundreds of ships. In some places, it worked. In others, it failed. The shadows were learning too quickly. As the 4 closed in, the Lance's defenses lit the darkness with a storm of fire. For the first time in a century, the galaxy was united in one feeling fear. And somewhere, beyond even the reach of the shadows, something else was watching. Something larger. Something older. It had not moved in 1,000 years. Now, because of humanity's shot, it began to stir. The 4 shadows closed in, slow at first, then faster, their movement no longer smooth but almost impatient. The pulses from the station's lights still slowed them a little, but not enough. Every minute, they covered more of the distance. Inside the Solar Lance station, the crew worked like their lives depended on every second because they did. The weapon would not be ready for another 20 hours. 20 hours they did not have. Kane paced the command deck. His boots made a dull echo against the metal floor, the only sound besides the constant tense hum of the charging rails. On the main screen, the shadows were like ink spreading across glass, each one blocking out whole clusters of stars. "They'll be in range in 40 minutes. The tactical officer said. Kane didn't look away from the screen. "All batteries to maximum readiness. Missile racks hot, plasma turrets primed, and start loading the point defense cannons with uranium shells." The gunnery chief frowned. "Sir, those shells won't even scratch them." "They won't." Need to, Kane replied. We're not trying to kill. We're trying to keep them away from the hull. The plan was simple and desperate. The smaller weapons would not destroy the shadows, but maybe they could push them back, force them to move by the station time until the lance was ready again in the galactic core. Alien governments were watching the live feed. Every major faction had tapped into the human military broadcasts, either officially or through spies. None of them dared to send reinforcements. They wanted to see what humanity's great weapon could really do before risking their own ships. 30 minutes before contact, the shadows split apart. Two moved toward the Lance station head-on. One swung wide, aiming for the human fleet waiting nearby. The last dipped under the station's orbital path, vanishing from direct sensors. There. Trying to flank us, the tactical officer said. Kane nodded. Bring all secondary scanners online. If we lose sight of one, we're finished. In the hangar bays, human pilots strapped into their small fighter craft. They knew they couldn't win against the shadows, but they could act. As moving beacons carrying the pulse pattern emitters into the path of the enemy, anything to slow them down. The first contact came suddenly. Shadow passed close to one of the fighters. The pilot screamed overcomes as his ship's canopy darkened from the outside, like liquid night pouring over it. The feed cut off mid-breath. Seconds. Later, another fighter disappeared, then another. There were no explosions, no wreckage, only silence where life had been. Open fire, Kane ordered. The station's turrets lit up, streams of plasma lancing through the dark. Missiles streaked away, their guidance systems locked on the strange, shifting shapes. For a moment, the space around the lance was alive with light and motion. The shadows reacted instantly. They twisted and stretched, forming impossible angles, avoiding most of the incoming fire. The few hits that landed seemed to sink into their bodies without effect, but Kane saw something. Freeze that frame, he told the tactical officer. The replay showed a shadow recoiling slightly when a uranium shell struck it. Not much, but enough to notice. All uranium guns. Concentrate on the one at bearing 179, Kane ordered. The cannons thundered. Slowly, that shadow began to pull back, its shape shivering like heat haze. Then the fourth shadow reappeared directly beneath the station. Evasive thrusters, Kane barked. The huge station groaned as its side engines fired, trying to shift orbit. Too late. The shadow rose up from below, brushing against the Lance's outer hull. The lights flickered. Crew members felt the temperature drop, their breath suddenly misting in the air. Systems began failing one by one: gravity stabilizers, navigation, sensors, even the comms. It was like the shadow was drinking the life out of the station itself. The chief engineer's voice came through the static. Sir, it's bleeding us dry. If it stays attached, we'll lose power to the Lance. Kane clenched his jaw. Detach the coolant lines from the reactor, vent it into space, right on top of that thing. Sir, that will overheat the reactor. Do it. Moments later, a torrent of superheated vapor erupted from the station's side, washing over the black shape. The first time, the shadow moved away on its own, curling back like a burned animal. The whole sensor showed the section it had. Touched was now frozen solid. Metal cracked like shattered glass. 2 more incoming, the tactical officer warned. Kane knew they couldn't keep this up. The shadows were probing, testing. Soon they would find the station's true weak point. Then came the worst news yet. A distant human scout ship sent a final transmission before going silent. More incoming. Dozens. The bridge fell silent. Not here to destroy the Lance, Kane said slowly. They're here to keep us busy, so the rest of them can pass deeper into the galaxy. If that was true, then hundreds of alien worlds were already in danger and they didn't even know. Kane opened a channel to all frequencies, even alien ones. His voice was steady, but his eyes were cold. To anyone listening, this is not just a human fight. If you can run, run now. If you can fight, follow our targeting data. And if you think they will spare you because you are not human, you are wrong. Outside, the 4 shadows regrouped, circling the Lance like predators, deciding how to strike again. And beyond them, in the deep black, the faint shapes of many more were beginning to appear. The real battle hadn't even started. Yet, the shapes in the dark kept multiplying. What had begun as 4 shadows circling the solar lance was now a swarm. Dozens moved in the distance, faint outlines that blotted out the stars. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. They knew their prey was trapped. Kane gripped the railing at the command deck. The lance was 18 hours away from firing. The shadows would reach them in less than 2. The station's outer lights still flashed the pulse pattern, but the effect had weakened. The shadows had adapted, their movements now smooth and unbroken again. The few fighters still flying made desperate runs, dragging their own emitters into the swarm. But each pass ended the same waste static on the comms. A blip gone from the sensors. In the alien capitals across the galaxy, leaders were beginning to panic. The Varix Empire had lost 2 colonies in the last hour. The Klin Dominion had withdrawn every fleet to its home system. The Macri Republic had gone completely silent, their last message simply saying, "They are here, for years." The galaxy had laughed at humanity's stubborn military spending, calling it paranoia. Now no one was laughing. They were watching, hoping the humans could hold. Because if the solar lance fell, the rest of them didn't stand a chance. Kane had no more patience for hope. He needed action. He opened a secure channel to the human fleet nearby. All warships form a wall between the lance and the incoming swarm. You are to hold that line at all costs. By the weapon time. Admiral, his tactical officer said quietly, "That will be a slaughter." "Yes, Kane," said, "it will." The fleet moved into position. 26 ships, cruisers, destroyers, frigates spread out into a defensive arc. The largest, the battleship Resolute, took the center. Their weapons lit up the darkness, throwing lines of light into the black void. The shadows hit them like a silent wave. Ships vanished whole, their lights snuffed out mid-broadside. Others fired until the last second, their guns still flashing as the darkness swallowed them. The Resolute lasted longer than most, its massive guns hammering into one shadow until the creature finally split apart and dissolved. But even that small victory came at a cost. The battleship's hull was cracked open, and within minutes it was gone. Kane watched the sensor display as ship after ship disappeared. The fleet was dying, but it was buying time. Lance's charge climbed faster. Now, 16, 15, 15? Then the tactical officer's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, the swarm is splitting. Half are still coming for us. The rest, they're heading toward Varix space." Kane's stomach turned. "They're forcing us to choose," he said. "Fire the lance when ready, no matter what's in the way if they reach the core worlds." He didn't finish the thought. The hours stretched like years. The swarm tore through what was left of the human fleet, but the survivors refused to retreat. They harassed the shadows, fired on them, forced them to change course, even if only for seconds. Finally, with just 2 hours to go, the lance was ready. The slug in its rails was bigger than the first, packed with a dense uranium core. Every system on the station was diverted to the weapon lighting, life support, even gravity. The crew floated in the dark, their breaths loud in the silence. "Target the largest," Kane ordered. The tactical feed locked onto a shadow so huge it blotted out half the display. It moved slowly, almost lazily, as if it didn't believe anything could touch it. The lance fired. The recoil shook the station. The slug vanished into the void, and a moment later, the giant shadow erupted in a flash of impossible light. Its form tore apart, breaking into countless fragments that scattered into nothing. The blast wave slammed into the smaller shadows. Pushing them back, the crew cheered, but the celebration died quickly. The shot had drained the lance completely. It would be another full day before it could fire again. And the swarm was still coming. Then, something unexpected happened. The alien fleets arrived. At first, Kane thought it was a trick of the sensors, but no, they were real. Dozens of Varix warships, Klin battle cruisers, and even Macri dreadnoughts poured into the sector. Ships that had once fought each other now formed ranks side by side. "This is Admiral Jor of the Varix Empire," a deep voice said over comms. "We are not here for you, human. We are here for them."
Out.
Without waiting for orders, the combined fleet opened fire. The blackness lit, with explosions, beams, and missile trails. The shadows twisted and struck back, their movement faster than before. But for the first time, they faced more than one enemy at a time. The battle raged for hours. Ships burned, fleets broke, but the swarm was slowed. And in that grinding, bloody fight, the galaxy learned something together. They could hurt these things, not icily, not cheaply, but they could. By the time the last shadow in the immediate swarm dissolved, the battlefield was a graveyard. Wreckage drifted in every direction. The Lance station still stood, but barely, its hull scorched and cracked. Of the human fleet, only 3 ships remained. The aliens had fared little better. There was no celebration. Just the quiet breathing of survivors overcomes. Kane looked at the tactical feed. The swarm they had fought was gone. But new contacts were already appearing on the edge of sensor range. Bigger, faster, more than before. They're not retreating, Kane said softly. They're just sending the next wave. And somewhere far out in the dark, a single massive signal pulsed once. Then twice, like the heartbeat of something too big to imagine. The wreckage field still spun in silence. Ships that had been proud symbols of entire civilizations now drifted as torn metal and shattered hulls. No one spoke on the comms. No one dared. The survivors knew the fight wasn't over. They were, just waiting for the next scream in the dark. Kane stood at the cracked observation window of the Solar Lance station. The repairs had begun immediately after the battle, but it was like trying to patch a sinking ship with your hands. Entire decks were sealed off. Some corridors had no atmosphere. The weapon was still recharging, and the engineering crew warned. It would be slower this time. Damage to the power conduits meant less energy could be drawn at once. That was when the first signal came in, not from the swarm, not from any known fleet, but from deep space beyond mapped sectors past the edge of known charts. The signal was steady, rhythmic, almost like the shadow's pulse, but not quite. Admiral, the comms officer said, voice tight, picking up a transmission in the same frequency band as the swarm. But it's modulated, almost like it's speaking. Kane frowned. Play it. The sound that filled the room was low, broken, and alien. Not a roar, not a scream, but a pattern, like words stretched and bent in ways human ears weren't meant to understand. Even so, Kane felt something stir in his mind, a faint recognition, like hearing an old voice you can't place. They're talking to us, Kane said quietly, or to each other. Either way, they're not just beasts. The galaxy leaders didn't want to hear it. When Kane sent his analysis to the Varix Empire, they dismissed it. The Klin Dominion claimed it was battlefield noise. Macquarie didn't respond at all, which, in Kane's experience, meant they were already trying to decode it themselves. The uneasy alliance held, but barely. The combined fleet stayed in formation around the Lance, each species keeping their own ships clustered close. There was no trust, only a shared fear of what was coming. It didn't take long for it to arrive. The next wave of shadows was different. Larger, yes, but also slower, spread wide, as if herding the defenders into a trap. Their movements had purpose. They didn't go straight for the Lance this time. Instead, they began sweeping toward the alien fleets first. The Varix were the first to break formation. Admiral Jor barked an order over the shared channel. We will not be bait. Our ships will reposition. Stay in formation. Kane snapped back. But it was too late. The Varix ships pulled back, opening a gap in the line. The shadows poured through it like water through a cracked dam. The fight turned chaotic instantly. Human destroyers tried to plug the breach, but the enemy smashed through. Klin cruisers peeled off to protect their own, leaving even more holes in the defense. The Macquarie dreadnoughts stayed in position till one shadow simply enveloped the lead ship, dragging it into the dark without a sound. Inside the Lance, alarms blared. Kane barked orders, trying to hold the defense together, but the swarm wasn't attacking like before. They weren't focused on killing everything. They were moving around the fleet, circling. Admiral, the tactical officer said. Pale, look at their formation. They're boxing us in. The display confirmed it. The shadows weren't rushing to destroy the lance. They were pushing the defenders toward a single point in space, a point that, according to the nav charts, was empty. But Kane had seen enough war to know traps never lead to empty space. The signal came again. Louder. Faster. This time, Kane felt the sound in his chest. It wasn't words exactly, but it had weight like a warning or a demand. Then the science officer gasped, "Admiral, that signal isn't coming from the swarm, it's coming from ahead. From where they're driving us." Kane's blood ran cold. "Get me visuals." The image appeared on the screen, grainy at first, then sharpening. There was something in the dark ahead, a shape so massive it made the shadows look small. It wasn't moving, it didn't have to, it just waited. It was a ship. What was left of one. A structure so ancient its hull was pitted with age, its surface covered in unknown markings. Parts of it glowed faintly, like embers under ash. "That's impossible," the science officer whispered. "It's older than any recorded civilization." The swarm tightened its circle, forcing the fleets closer to the massive relic. Kane didn't know why, but every instinct screamed that if they got too close, something irreversible would happen. He opened a fleet-wide channel. "Break formation. All ships scatter. Do not let them push you into that thing." Some listened. Most didn't. The alien admirals hesitated, unwilling to abandon their own formations. Then, from the relic, light began to pulse. Not steady. Not like a beacon, but in the exact same rhythm the shadows had used since the beginning. The comms officer's voice trembled. "Sir, that's not a relic. It's where they came from." Kane stared at the display. The truth was worse than he'd imagined. The swarm wasn't invading. They were defending something, and whatever was inside that ancient ship was waking up. The pulsing light from the ancient ship grew faster, brighter. The shadows tightened their ring, cutting off every escape route. It was as if the entire swarm was just a wall keeping the defenders locked in place until the thing inside finished waking. Kane didn't blink. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the growing glow, each pulse sending a vibration through the solar lance's hull. Every instinct told him that when the light stopped pulsing, it would mean something terrible. The Varric's fleet fired first. They weren't aiming at the shadows, they targeted the relic itself. Massive beams of green energy streaked across space, slamming into the ancient hull. But instead of tearing through, the beams scattered, breaking apart like water hitting rock. The relic didn't even tremble. "Energy absorption," the science officer muttered. "It's feeding on the attacks." The Klin ships followed, suit desperate to break free, but the effect was the same. Each strike made the relic's glow grow stronger. "Cease fire," Kane barked. "You're powering it up." No one listened. Panic had already infected the fleet, inside the lance. The crew worked frantically to bring the railgun back online. The weapon was still damaged, but Kane knew it was their only chance. They needed to hit that relic before it finished waking whatever was inside. The shadows didn't attack like before. They moved in perfect formation, blocking any ship that tried to escape the circle. They weren't predators, now they were guards. The Macquarie dreadnoughts made a desperate push toward the relic, engines burning white-hot. But before they could close the distance, the shadows shifted. One of them, larger than any seen before, dash unfolded. It was not a shape Kane had words for. It looked like it was made of both matter and shadow, solid and yet not. It opened what could only be called a mouth, and the pulse from the relic answered. In perfect rhythm, then it spoke. The voice was low, layered like countless whispers at once. The translators didn't know what to do with it, but the meaning somehow slipped into Kane's mind anyway. "You do not belong here." The bridge fell. Silent, no one breathed. Kane felt his throat tighten. The light from the relic flared, and something began to rise from its surface. At first, Kane thought it was part of the ship, but then it broke free, a towering figure, plated in armor so ancient it looked like it had been forged in the birth of stars. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if it had been sleeping for longer than civilizations had existed. Every shadow in the swarm lowered itself slightly, as if bowing. Kane knew in that instant that this was the real threat. The swarm wasn't the enemy, they were just the chains keeping this thing contained. And now, the chains were being broken. The massive figure turned its head toward the fleet. Even at this distance, Kane felt the weight of its gaze. Ships powered. Down without warning. Systems failed. Crews screamed as their minds were touched by something vast and cold. "This is bad," the tactical officer whispered, and it was the understatement of the century. Kane slammed his fist on the console. "Railgun status." 2 minutes, the engineer replied, voice strained. They didn't have 2 minutes. The relic's glow was now constant, no longer pulsing. Whatever process had been happening was complete. The armored figure raised one massive hand. The space between it and the fleet rippled like disturbed water. The first ship to be caught in the ripple was a Klin battleship. It didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It simply folded in on itself, vanishing without light or debris. Gone. Panic tore through the remaining fleets. Ships fired wildly, some trying to escape, others trying to take the relic down. The shadows moved instantly, intercepting every attempt. "Admiral," the comms officer said, voice breaking, "we're getting civilian distress calls from half the sectors around us. It's spreading." Kane didn't waste time. He opened a direct. "Channel to all ships," his voice sharp and clear. "Listen to me. Forget your borders, forget your politics. That thing will not stop with us. If it reaches full strength, it will sweep through the galaxy. And nothing will matter, not your empires, not your fleets, not your people. Our only shot is the lance. We keep it alive long enough for one more shot." Some ships turned back toward the formation. Others fled, but enough stayed. Enough to buy a chance. The giant figure began moving. Toward them now, slow but unstoppable. The shadows shifted, pushing the defenders back into range. Kane knew they were running out of time. 30 seconds, the engineer called out. The lance shook violently as several shadows rammed its hull. Fires broke out in the lower decks. Gravity flickered. Crew members were thrown from their stations. 10 seconds. Yeah. The engineer shouted. The figure raised its hand again, and Kane knew the next ripple would take the lance itself. "Fire," Kane roared. The railgun thundered. The shot streaked across the void, a blazing spear of metal moving faster than thought. It tore through shadows, through the space between, and slammed into the relic with the force of a dying star. The light exploded outward. The swarm screamed not in pain, but in something else. The figure staggered. And then everything went silent.